Good evening. Welcome to Gap Perspective. Hello, Haley. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And today is a very special day. We have a very special guest who is a friend of mine and a mentor of mine. Today we will be diving into the world of self-publishing. Our guest is Jon D'Amore, an accomplished self-published author who has written 6 books. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he is an excellent writer. And The Boss Always Sits in the Back is, I believe, his first book and his most famous. Dead Fellas, Delivery Man, As Long as I Have Lips, Rub Down, Me and George. And please forgive me, John, if I've left anything out. Um, we're so honored to have you as our guest. Thank
Thank
you for joining us. And I
Oh,
hope that everyone that's viewing this will see what a great author you are and get some tips if they're interested in writing a book. We
well,
do also
that's
have Haley, my co-partner here, who's an author, and I am a wannabe author in the process of trying to write my book. So Haley, I think that you wanted to start the interview with John. First of all, John, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and I really
Thank
appreciate it.
you. We are
Good.
honored to have you. Okay, Haley, you could go forward with your questions if you'd like for John. Would you like to
Oh,
start the interview?
of course, sounds good. So, my first question for you, John, is what do you think continues to draw readers to the mob story genre even decades after these stories first became popular?
That's a good question and timely, actually. And this is my observation. Uh, Certainly, back in the early 1970s, when certain movies of that genre came out, uh, it reignited that genre, to be honest. And that started with a book. The movies, The Godfather, is what we're talking about. The movies are obviously Godfather 1, Godfather 2. According to the American Film Institute, they are two of the top five movies of all time. Unfortunately, and if Francis Ford Coppola ever hears this, please don't take this personally. Godfather 3 did not make it. But anyway, uh, it all started with the book, The Godfather. And so you wouldn't have had the movie without having that book to begin with. And that's what really started uh, that immediate uphill rise of that genre, the mob genre. Of course, uh, books proliferated. Everybody had a mob story back in the 70s and 80s and 90s because it was because of that you had guys. Then the next thing that came forward was guys like Henry Hill, who partnered with somebody because Henry certainly could not write a book, but he partnered with somebody, and it became Goodfellas. And so immediately, that became uh, 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 a a movie, and then because of that, cops who worked undercover for years all of a sudden started writing their stories about the mafia. And so you had books like Donnie Brasco, which made the movie Donnie Brasco. And it that happened. Now I will be honest. When I didn't write the book The Boss because it was just a popular genre. My story of what took place and with my godfather when for my 22nd birthday, uh, I actually experienced something with these guys that I grew up around. because I was much younger than them. My godfather brought me to Las Vegas for my 22nd birthday, and within 5 or 6 hours of me arriving in Vegas, I wound up being part of a very famous scam that funneled tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars out of Las Vegas casinos. And I knew then, when I was 22, and at the time I was a musician, writing was not something that I saw in my life at that time. I did write small things here and there, did work for newspapers and stuff before that, but that event of what took place for 2 years with these guys of going to Las Vegas, I knew at some point it would make a great story. Never thought anything more than that. And when I did talk to my godfather about it, when I was 22, 23, it was very plainly put, you can never write this story until the primary people are no longer with us. And I had to wait until 1999, and when I was 46 years old, before I was able to start writing that book. And then worked on it diligently. I had moved out to Hollywood, California at that point, worked on it diligently. And even though I completed, I guess what you could say, the first draft or even the eighth draft, because it's never really done until it's just about to be published. But I finished early drafts back in the early 2000s, and then I wound up working for the studios, the movie studios and production companies, as a what was called a script doctor, because I also had the ability to learn how to write screenplays. And there are certain, just like in writing books, there are certain formats that need to be followed. The same applies for screenplays, and I was able to do that. So I put the book writing on the side for many years, actually, about 12 or 13 years before I decided to then put venture out I took the boss out and re-edited it, and of course, because times had changed, I even needed to do some formatting changes in that period. But so to answer your question about the genre of mob movies or mob books, there was a time. And I always, when I would be asked that on my book tours, why is why does why are these kinds of books so popular? And it really was because America, and I don't know if that really applies to certain parts of America because it's a big country, but the the major capitals of the United States, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, St. Louis, Philadelphia, Boston, New York, and anywhere in New Jersey, we've always had a fascination with the mafia, with the mob, with that genre, because it was a part, certainly, Haley, not your life. Okay, but you did not grow up with that as a way of life, like I would say Janet
This
and I,
boomers. This is
you
a
know.
boomer show, this one, Haley.
Yes.
We just grew up around those people, and certainly, the kids today would not have a clue about just certain words or things that we would say, like, where'd you get that? Oh, it fell off the truck. Most people would not have a clue what that would mean. But if you grew up in Hudson County in the 50s and 60s and 70s and into the 80s, that was just another term that
Yes.
would be used. So interestingly, um I do believe that I mean, every once in a while there'll be a mob story that will pop up, but you got to remember the mob stories that were written, the great ones, were all based on the families, the mafia
Mhm.
families that were around in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and 70s. The last of those people that anybody would remember would be a guy like John Gotti, and he was the last of them. That was it. I don't care what anybody would say. The mafia is no longer the Italian mafia. It did sort of
Different.
evolve into a rush. The Russians have sort of taken over that. So and good for them. That's
Italians are going to be mad at you. You better watch it.
say again.
The Italians are going to be mad at you. You better watch it.
No, no, actually,
It's true. There's all different mobs now.
they'd be happy to hear that. Oh yeah, there
There's
is
all
no
different
story.
mobs.
Yeah,
Really.
but what was considered the mob is no more.
No.
If anybody out there, if you have Netflix, uh, the most recent of these legitimate, and trust me, I don't know if it's legitimate movies, was called The Irishman. Uh,
Yes.
and
My
Yeah,
friend
I
and
was in
love
that
that
movie.
one.
but it had every out of work Italian actor, in if Marlon
Sure.
Brando was still alive, he would have been in it. De Niro, Joe Pesci, Al Pacino, and everybody who was out of work that was in The Sopranos, everybody who hasn't worked since Casino,
Yeah.
Goodfellas, uh, and as a movie, it's long. I don't know. I think it's like
It is
three
kind of long.
hours or more, a little bit. And I hate saying this, it was produced by the guy who did The Sopranos. It was directed by Martin Scorsese. I mean, the money that got thrown into this thing, and the writer who wrote the script has a long track record of well-known scripts. But everything about that movie in its writing form, in the screenwriter's world. Not that I want to dwell on screenwriters, but there's a term that we use in screenwriting. It's get into the scene late and get out of the scene early, so that you tell everything in the shortest amount of time possible, logically, and get and move on to the next scene. Now, in The Irishman, they could have made that a fantastic hour and 45-minute movie.
Yes, I agree. I
They
agree.
absolutely could have done that if they had just gotten rid of a
Condensed it
lot
a
of
little
stuff.
bit. Yeah.
Absolutely. But anyway, so that's my take on the genre of mafia. It's sort of gone by now.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, one will pop up. But you see, Hallie, your generation and future generations won't care. You won't be able to relate to it. That's
No.
just it.
Right.
Where my generation and maybe one generation younger, your parents' generation, would be able to relate to it. But
Right.
future generations aren't going to. Simple as
Do
that.
you remember, John? Oh,
What?
sorry. Do you remember we knew who the bookie was on the corner as a kid?
Yeah,
You wouldn't know that, Haley,
all,
correct?
all,
Do you know
all
what
the
that
all
No.
is?
all the
No.
corners, or not all the corners, but many corners. It either had a barber shop or a mom and pop candy store or a
Or a bar.
market. And
And
or
a bar.
yes, and a bar, and the bar. Every block had a bar, but
And
or they called them taverns or bar and grills.
taverns, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But anyway, the mom and pop place, they would take numbers,
Pick numbers.
a
Yeah.
three-digit gambling thing where
Yes.
they would take money and then if you hit those three numbers, which
For a
was the
nickel.
entire process in the newspaper, you made money. What happened was technically that was gambling because mom and pop turned that money over to other people. You know, the money that they collected that nobody hit on, it went to organized crime, without a doubt. But
Yeah.
uh, but the government realized, wait a minute, we're not making money here. So
Yeah.
back in the I think late 1970, no, in the mid 1970s, they started the New Jersey lottery, the Pick Three.
Was it in
I
the 70s? It's out that
Absolutely,
long?
because I remember we were living in I was living in Secaucus, and my father would buy the tickets, and I would pin them to the wall in my bedroom, in my music room, until the numbers came out, and then I'd read them. And we didn't move out of there until 1977, so it was
Mm.
definitely in the mid 70s. So the government got involved. So now you could just walk into the mom and pop shop, and instead of mom and pop making money, they had a machine and the government made the money. And since then, you could see how much the government makes because there's like 400 different lotteries that
Yes.
could be made.
Yes.
You know, the biggest mafia right now is government because everything, they just do it. Okay, let's
That's
move
true.
on. Let's get off
All
that
right.
subject.
That's a story for another day.
Absolutely.
Can I ask one question, Hale?
Yes.
Um, when you wrote that book, did you think about your audience or did you write or do you write
No.
primarily
I
for yourself?
that particular book, you got to remember that book, that was my first book, and it was a memoir. You don't write your memoir as a first book. If you're somebody, you usually have some level of success, whether it was you're a movie star, a rock star,
Right.
something, you figured out quantum physics. And then you wrote your memoir as you got
Right.
older. But here I was, I was younger. I was, like I said, I was about 46, 47 when I was writing that book. And I never thought about who my audience was. All I wanted to
Um,
tell was this great story about these guys who, most of them, never finished high school. Only one of them, the guy who figured out the scam in the first place, went to college for about a year and a half. But what they had done and the way they did it was so fantastic. Until, of course, they got found out. But even again, I was only involved for 2 years before that happened. They had been doing it for a year before I got there, so they were doing it for over 3 years. It was just a great story. So I never was like, I got to do this. Plus, the story had to be true. You see, if you're going to write for your audience, then you fictionalize because you got to make it good for the audience.
I
But if
see.
you're going to
Okay.
write an absolute true story, you just got to hope it's good enough for the audience to like in the first place, and you have to write it well enough. So my first book, I did not write for an audience. Now,
So you wrote it for yourself.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And to be honest, I wrote it for the guys who were still alive, and I wanted to immortalize them.
Okay.
Of course, I had them pick their aliases. If they were still alive, I had them pick their names that they would let me use in the book. So I did that. Okay,
How
so
long did it take you to write that book, John?
I would say from the time I started writing it, and then we'll talk about how that, when I started writing it, I wrote, I was writing about, it was coming up on my 22nd birthday that I started the book with. My 22nd birthday, my cousin was reached out to me and, well, my godfather, and said, "What are you doing?" I was in Los Angeles at the time. He says, "Why don't you meet me in Vegas?" Okay. That's how the story was going to start. Now, this is when I realized there's no way I can write this story in a linear fashion, going from my first thought to
Mhm.
the final to the end. It would have to, I would have to write this story in sections that came to my mind that I wanted to recall and write in detail, but it didn't take place yet. So I would have to write those chapters and put them in the way I do it. I just would take them and put them at the bottom of my Word document that I was working on so I could then just scroll down, go get it, and bring it up or write to it. But when I started writing that book, I believed it was going to start the week before my 22nd birthday.
And you
So,
completed it how long later?
about a year after I started it until I hit the end, I would say just short of a year and a half.
Oh,
But then again, yeah, but but that was 279 Word document pages. Okay. Now, again, then I put it away. And then over time, I re-edited it. I would remember other stories or anecdotes or something about a guy or somebody reminded me of something. So I was always able to go back in and do that. And that is something else we'll talk about. But let me just say that when I started writing that about my 22nd birthday, and then I got into that chapter, I realized now I'm telling something, but the audience needs to know something prior to that. They need to know the family that I grew up in. It's not just like, "Hi, I'm this musician, Mountain California. I'm 22 years old. I get a phone call from my godfather, meet me in Vegas." I needed to explain the family I grew up in, when I started playing music and how important it was to me, how I wound up out in Las Vegas, and I had my family out in California owned a very famous restaurant. So I was out there. I had to explain how my family got from Italy to Brooklyn to Hudson County, New Jersey to Hollywood, California. So every time I started doing that, what I began as chapter one, well, and then it became chapter two. Well, then it became chapter three. Now, when the book is out, what I thought was chapter one is now chapter five because
okay.
I had to keep putting backstory in there and making all of that work so that everything I lay out in the beginning plays out or you know yeah, it plays out somewhere in the book, and so that the end justifies everything I told you in the
I
story.
like that you don't call them chapters in that book. You call them rounds.
I called them rounds, and certainly that's the only book that I call them rounds. All my other books have chapters,
Okay.
but because these guys, a lot of these guys, especially the ones I was writing about, they started as teenagers as boxers,
I
and they
know.
all
I have one
wanted
in
to,
my own family.
yeah, they all wanted to be famous boxers at that time in the 1940s and 50s.
Yes.
And so in again in homage to them, I called it rounds. And back uh, in the '60s and stuff, there were more rounds in a boxing match than there are now. So that's
That's
why
what I
my book
figured. That's
has
what.
that many rounds. Yeah, yeah. So there you go. It's a good question. Okay, now you take that,
Yeah.
and did I write that for an audience or specifically, thinking about an audience? No. The Boss was out for 3 years, and just remember, in my mind, was done writing books. I was like, this is it. I'm happy doing this. But it did so well, and I got to do 3 tours of the country back and forth from LA back to New Jersey and back to LA just on that one book. But it took a lot of work as a self published author. You have to do all that, you have to arrange all that. And you don't book a tour as you're doing it. You have to start booking that tour 5 to 6 months before you even put your key in the ignition and drive your
Oh,
car across the country.
okay.
You have to book all that. You have to advertise all that. You have to plan for all that. You have to order books for all
So you
that.
don't have an agent, John? Do you have an
No,
agent?
I
Do you
no,
have an
I do
agent?
not. No, no, and
You are
and
the
I mean
agent.
we can always talk about that too, but and that was my problem at a certain point because all of my books are in different genres, and agents, many of them have a hard time dealing with more than 2 genres. They don't want to handle an author who writes romantic comedies, mafia memoirs,
Right.
zombie stories, vigilante stories. They don't want that. They want you to. They want to know how to sell you, so they don't want to have to work real hard. That's my take
Right.
on it.
Right.
Okay, so
Okay,
after
Gary.
like 3.5 years, people were like, "Hey, you got to put out another book. This is really great." Well, I didn't have another mafia story in me. Those guys were dead. Those guys didn't do anything fantastic after the story I told. There was nothing to tell. I had grown up and moved away and got away from those guys. It didn't matter. So, what was I going to do? I didn't know. But while now I had been in Los Angeles for a handful of years, a handful, 13, working for the studios, and then I had co-authored some screenplays with some other people, just for kicks, and we had a good time. And me and this guy, Steve Barr, who was a fantastic screenwriter, we came up with an idea of he wrote really good horror stories and he felt I wrote really good mafia stories. So we figured we'd combine those two talents and we wrote Deadfellas,
I
uh,
knew that was
a,
it. Yes,
a
this.
screenplay for Deadfellas, just like Goodfellas, but they're dead. They're zombies. They're mob zombies. Um, and so we had that script, and it was sitting in the computer, and I needed to get another book out. So I called up Steve. I said, Steve, screenplay is really thin, especially a zombie movie. It's only about like 95 pages. So I said, Steve, would you mind if I blew out the story? I give it like 30 years of backstory and a bunch of side stories in the middle and just use the zombie part of all this towards the end when it makes sense? He said, yeah, go ahead. So that's what I did. And
That's how
and
you
I
got Deadfellas.
and then, but it was easier, and it only took about 9 months because you got to remember, I had the, I had the premise of the story already done. I knew where the ending was going to be. All I had to do was come up with a lot of backstory and make it fun. So I
Mhm.
did that, and so that was how I did the Deadfellas. And then I'll be honest, it wasn't the wisest choice. I had a great audience of male and female. The age categories, the demographics were as as young as say 19, 20, to people in their 70s and early 80s who was still had, the vision to read. And the Boss did very well with them. And it did very well with women because I didn't degrade women in the story. I didn't overdo anything sexually in any way, and I made the story revolve around family, which is what every mafia story technically should be about, whether it's the family of of the mob or your actual mother, father, grandparents, that whole thing. So I had a great audience because of that. But then Deadfellas, well, let's just say the women weren't too thrilled about zombies.
No.
I sort of lost my female audience to a degree. The guys liked it because it was still mob and there was a little goriness towards the end of it. But then, unbeknownst to me, I had picked up an entirely new audience, an audience of like these goth kids who love
That's
zombies. And I
Walking
had no
Dead.
idea that there was, I didn't market it to that, but it got there. They liked it. So though I lost some audience, I picked up more. The next book was just a bunch of true stories that I had heard in during life about how people had gotten screwed uh, from people that they trusted throughout their life. So I wanted to write a story about a vigilante, somebody who could right the wrongs of
So
of innocent
that's
people.
the delivery man.
That is the delivery
I know
man.
I read that.
And so again, that came out. So I started just producing books, writing books, coming out with one pretty much every year because I found that going out on the road in early September until the end of October, people were back from vacation and they books were a really good way to they were a really good Christmas present. And that was the premise of the tours. I sold lots of books in October and stuff like that because people were getting ready for things. Now, let me, and so I did that up until the third book. So I actually I toured the country 5 times. And then when just as long as I have lips was coming out, I had a full tour booked, and I was leaving in April of 2020. And in March of 2020, we weren't allowed to go anywhere anymore. And
That's
so
right.
my entire tour got canceled. I had I had ordered approximately 20, no, I think it was 1,500 of the new books printed and 750, I think 250 or so of my three previous books. So I had all these books ordered to be printed and they were going to be shipped to various locations around the country so that as I got to those locations, I would always be able to refill my supply of books. Well, I was fortunate enough to change the shipping, but I couldn't change the printing. And so all of those books wound up in on pallets in my house when I lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And what was I going to do? I had just purchased a lot of books, over 2,000 books that I paid for, and a tour that got canceled. Everything was falling apart. Plus, we couldn't go anywhere. But out of the clear blue sky, this thing called Zoom came up. It just happened during COVID. And I found out that if I didn't need to go to Wichita, Kansas and see 45 or 50 people in a bookstore. I could promote my book readings on Facebook and I could do people all across the country. And so I did over, I think, the course of about 7 or 8 months. Uh, I think it's something like 35 readings, because of course it's only at that point for 4 books, but I was doing them in different time zones. I was waking up at 1 o'clock in the morning to do readings for Australia, where it was like 6 o'clock in
Wow.
the evening and stuff like that. But it didn't matter, because not that they were buying the books that I had, but they were buying those books on Amazon internationally. Not that I had to ship them.
That's really
But
good.
I in the
These
books that I sold in the United States, I would always emphasize my website. People were buying them from my website, and I did get rid of those books. It took a little longer than I had anticipated, but
Which
I
book was the bestseller?
of you mean now or by at
Out of
that
all
time?
your books, which one
Out
was
of
the
all my
bestseller?
books, only because The Boss is around the longest and it got the most promotion. That is.
That is.
And then oddly enough, my last book, Me and George, is the second largest because that
And
really appeals to a lot of people. And then the other 4 books in the middle, I'm not complaining. They're fine. Let me just say this about what I saw.
John,
Yeah.
we have to, it's 7:46. We have to be off by 8. I just wanted to let you know that. So
Okay.
we have
No,
about 5 more
no problem.
minutes.
No problem. No problem. Okay, this is important. Okay,
Yes.
especially um, for you self-published authors. When I put the boss out in, I think it was 2013, uh, I sent I sent 300 emails specifically to 300 people ages 16 to late 70s. And I told them they must respond because it had to do with the statistics, the numbers I needed to see. If you were going to read a book, did you want that book to be paper? Do you want an ebook? Now you got to remember this is 2012. Maybe I'm asking this before I'm actually getting ready to go on the road and to print all this. Or do you want an audio book? 300 people responded. 66% on the nose wanted print books. 31% wanted ebooks. The remaining, whatever that is, 6% or so, wanted audiobooks. And that, when you think about it, it's not a lot of people, but those were primarily people who I know them. They were people who traveled a lot, so they were on planes and they like to listen to or they drove personally. I can't drive and listen to a book, but or they would drive. And a lot of the people that wanted ebooks at the time were older people who really would have liked print books, but on a reader they could make the font bigger. And
Gotcha.
as you get older, some people need to have
Mm,
Sure.
larger font. Okay,
yes.
now I will absolutely tell you, my ebook, I did do an ebook for the boss, and it has made me the least amount of money of it was
Really
yeah, it did
interesting.
not, it was not, in my opinion, unless you get a famous person to read your book for you and your book is already famous. For people like us, I don't think it's very important. And especially, I hear some people saying, "Oh, I'm going to have AI do it." Oh, read the book. No, bad. Okay. Um,
And
so,
you can't copyright AI.
and there you go, there you go. So, here's the thing. In since that time, those statistics have changed. 60% of the people buying books are buying ebooks. 35 to 40% of the people, if that, are buying print books. Okay,
I
now
still
I
like
I
print
don't
books.
care how people buy my books. The fact that they
That's
want
right.
to read my books is wonderful. But as an author, self-published author, Just remember, ebooks that go through either Barnes and Noble to their Nook or Apple to their iPad or to Amazon to the Kindle. Those books are at least a third of the price of your print book. So you're making less. All those companies still take 40% right off the top, whether it's a print book or an ebook. So if you're making less as a book and then they still take their 40%, your profit on an ebook is nowhere near your profit on a print book. But that is the way of the world right now. There
You
you
think
go.
it's reversing though? You
No,
think it's reversing? Because I
no,
see people keep
you
saying
know,
to me,
that's like
I
saying
like the
vinyl's
books.
coming back on records. You know, it's not. You know, a couple of people are buying vinyl, some people are buying books,
Yeah.
most people are
I
buying
like the
ebooks.
feel of a book.
I agree with you.
Me too.
I agree with you. But if you notice, nobody has book cabinets anymore or bookshelves.
I do.
Okay. Okay, you do. The
'Cause I'm old.
majority of people do not. What they have is, 400 books on their
Kindles. I
iPad.
know.
Yep.
So that's what the business is. I'm sure I
Well,
spent way too much time talking.
well, we didn't have to interview you. We were prepared, but I think you covered all the
Yes.
bases. Do you have anything for him, Haley, for
I'll
John?
be happy to do this again because I just ramble. But I hope
Well,
it
no, you
helps
really
somebody.
were.
I hope I
No,
helped
it's
somebody.
very good.
It was very good. It was very good.
Yes.
And I hope that a lot of you is buy your books because they certainly should read them. I had a question though before we go about one book. You're gonna laugh and
Mm-hmm.
don't say anything smart.
Uh,
The
uh,
Rub Down.
yeah.
Did you have to do research for that book? Did you do
Okay.
research
As you can see on the cover of that,
Yep.
that was also a screenplay that I co-wrote with
with
Laura
someone else?
Pomino. Yes.
Yeah.
She had an idea for a story, a script, and she didn't know how to get past like the
Oh,
22nd page. And I helped her write the screenplay. And then when I needed a
oh,
book,
okay.
I called her up. I said, Laura, you mind if I turn this into a book? And so I all I'll say is yes, while we were in Los Angeles, we did a lot of research on
I
to
bet
write
you
that
did.
story. And that
Okay.
was the place to do it. So okay. Anyway,
It was
any more
great having
questions?
you, John. It was really
Oh,
great.
I'm happy to do this, and if you wanna do it again, just for other questions, for writing styles, for editing, for formatting. There's for self-publishing. I could talk to you about copywriting and getting your ISBN numbers and all of those stupid things, and why you should never give money to a company that calls themselves publishers. Never give money to
You're
get
right.
your book published. Even if they tell you you'll own the copyright, you have no idea what you will not own after that
I know.
and how much
Well,
you're
I learned
getting
that from you.
screwed out of. Do not pay money to publishing companies. They are scams. They are taking advantage of people who, in the 21st century, want to write a book.
You're
You
right. You're
know?
absolutely right because there's so many of them, and I don't even think they're in this
There
country, half
are.
of them.
Okay,
But
all you
John,
need is a good formatter, a good editor, a cover artist, and you could do it all yourself.
yes.
There you go.
Thank you, John, for your time. Again, it was an honor to have you. You have taught us so much today, and you're interesting writer. Haley, what would you like to say to John?
Thank you so much, John, for coming on. It's very interesting, and I learned a lot from
My
yours.
pleasure. And I'm sure that you could teach a lot of people about children's books and what you need to do to write children's books. Maybe one day I'll have you on our podcast.
Oh, I would love that. That
There
sounds
you
great.
go. You have no idea how
Um,
many people I know who I just wish I have so many great ideas for children's books, and it's a little, I can't tell them how to write it, because that's not That's not my field. I could tell
Well,
them what
Haley,
to
I don't want
do
to speak for
once.
you, but
I
she
could
did
tell them what
her.
to do once you type the end. You know, I could tell you what to do to make it a book. But you know, as far as writing it for the audience, not 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 for me.
Right. Great.
Okay.
Well, this
Yeah,
was
I'd
a
love to.
great interview, John, and thank you again.
My pleasure.
And maybe I'll see you tomorrow at the pool. I'm coming down.
Yeah, it may be. Let me know. It's supposed to be a little cloudy, but who knows? Who cares? Take care.
Okay.
Peace.
You
Thank
too.
you,
Thank
John.
you.
Bye
Have a
bye.
good night.
You
Thank you.
too. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Gap Perspective with Haley and Janet. And once again, we thank our special guest, Jon D'Amore, for coming on. Take care.